We're seeing this flurry of activity, as I've been saying, in the banking sector specifically, and this despite there being many question marks still around Amcon sustainability, who's going to be leading that company moving forward. What's your view on the confidence that it's already managed to trigger here?
I think the activity that we've seen has been expected. I do, however, agree with you that the confidence is slightly misplaced at the moment until we get a better understanding of the structure of Amcon, who's going to be leading it, and actually how they're going to finance this acquisition of bad loans from the banks. I think I'm a bit skeptical about it because, for example, you have the Debt Management Office announcing that in Q3 this year they're going to raise 300 billion naira. Now, that 300 billion naira is to fund the budget, help fund the budget deficit. This budget deficit doesn't take into account any funding for Amcon. Yeah. And this 300 billion naira doesn't take any funding for Amcon. So is Amcon going to provide funding above that 300 billion, and can the market really take that in?
Well, while that confidence seems to be a bit misplaced for now, it certainly helps that we're seeing the kind of earnings reports that we're seeing emerge out of the banking sector. First Bank out yesterday afternoon, where it reported a more than tenfold rise in pre-tax profit to 31.69 billion naira. That share price, though, succumbing to some trading pressure by the close. So run us through what you make of what surfaced there, where the result seemed to have been overall very positive.
I think the First Bank result, just on the bare figures, it looks very positive, especially when you compare a PBT of 30-odd billion compared to only 4 billion the similar time last year. But when you dig down into the figures and you look at the balance sheet, well, all that's really happened, to be honest, is that First Bank are just providing less. Well, this time last year, they had provisions for risk assets of 40 billion. Mm-hmm. They have a write back of about 1 billion. And that is what really drives into the profits. Operating expenses are higher. The cost income ratio has come down from over 94% to 74%, which is impressive. But gross earnings is also down 6.7%. So what I think we're seeing is that First Bank really, in terms of overall, hasn't really changed that much, except for the provisions are less. Yeah. But then if you look into it on division by division basis, you see that investment banking division is now surging past the retail banking division in terms of contribution to profits.
Mm-hmm. And that's where the question emerges around the extension of their loans and where that's being directed, because while they've highlighted that loans to the private sector increased 19.9% to 1.1 trillion naira, the market seems to be questioning where and who they're actually lending to, that lots of this funding is being directed to their bigger and healthier clients, so to speak.
Exactly. But even saying that, the non-performing loans ratio has gone up to 5.75% from, I think, was about 4% this time last year. But I think what most banks are doing, as you said, is either lending to the high-end low-risk clients, or if we look at the four main deals that First Bank highlighted, a part of the investment banking division, Bayelsa State Bond, Lagos State Bond, Main One Financing, at 50% of that is to government bonds.
Yeah, well, it's certainly interesting that it's the big banks, the healthier banks, if we can call them that, are coming under pressure. GTE Bank, First City Monument Bank, Zenith Bank, along with First Bank yesterday, all falling back, while most of the rescued banks have been seeing some respite. What are you making of that almost rotation we're seeing in terms of investor interest here?
I think you can connect that to the ascent of the Amcon bill. Yeah. I think some analysts and some investors are seeing light at the end of the tunnel, especially when you look at also CBN's meeting with shareholder groups and saying that shareholders will have a big say in the recapitalization of the rescued banks. I think confidence that there will be a resolution to the rescue bank solution is high. But it then go back again to, can Amcon actually do all that everyone expects them to do?
Just very quickly then, because out of those banks that were rescued last year, Bank PHB was one of them. It was also out with numbers yesterday. Highlights for you that emerged out of those numbers?
The gross earnings was down 55%, but the profits were 2.7 billion, which is slightly down about 7%. So what we're seeing is less earnings, but increased profitability, which I think is suggested it's really provisions.